The issue, though, is folks say we need to cut the red tape. The next question is where and what. Permitting time is great. Sometimes we hear that the permits take so long is because we don't have enough people working in that agency. Well, if we got more people trying to process the permits, that costs more tax dollars, or we have to cut it somewhere else when we already have a deficit. So these are very easy problems to talk about, but when you talk about details and specifics, that's where it's difficult. Now, Kurt and I are going to be in the governor's office later this afternoon, and I'm going to be proposing that we actually sit down and get past that we should cut red tape and we should do this to actually, what can we do? If there's a story going around about a business that it took 13 months, we should look at why that happened. We should dig in and say, what was the company? Where did the permit go to? Why did it take that long? And solve these problems, specific problems. Because I also heard, I think I was here last year with Representative Seifert, who talked about New Flyer Bus had a hard time as well. Well, we shouldn't just talk about it. We should actually go to the department and say, why did that happen, and fix it. And case by case, we'll finally, hopefully, find where the symptoms are and solve the problem.
Go ahead.
Oh, sure. And some of the specific examples, one in particular, we were, I was down with Representative Rod Hamilton, one of our members from down in south central, or southwestern Minnesota. We were touring a dairy farm, and we literally got to the end of the tour, and we're standing in the milk room, and I said, well, you know, the dairy investment tax credit's a thing I know you guys are interested in. We may not have enough money for some of these things now. What is that we could do to get out of your way? And one of the dairy farmers from the back of the room raised his hand, and he said, I've got an example. He said, twice a year you come out here and inspect my farm. Great, I understand. We want you to have safe milk. We want you to make sure that the consumer feels confident in the milk that they're getting at the store every day. He said, but when you come out and inspect our farm, he said, it's kind of laughable because every single time we send a load of milk into town, into the creamery, he said, we can tell what cows it came from, what farm it came from, what nutrients they're on, and how old the cows are. The test that you do every 2 or 3 days when you get milk in, that's where you know the quality and the safety of the milk. He said, coming out here and walking around my farm twice a year is a little, he said, it's kind of silly. I said, well, what can we do about it? He said, adopt the Wisconsin law. He said, they go in and they come in once a year. You know when it's going to happen. You're prepared for it. You have all your files in line. You have everything prepared for you. He said, and at the end of the day, out of all of our farmers, 99 out of 100 of them actually pass. He said, it's the one time that, you know, maybe the main family member that runs the farm got hurt or was off the farm and somebody else was filling in and didn't quite have everything up to snuff. But for the one farmer out of 100 or out of 90 that fails, come back and inspect his farm a second time. But don't come out twice a year because it's just kind of, you know, silly that you walk around and look instead of actually testing the milk, which goes every 2 days. So we actually, Representative Hamilton got the Wisconsin law. Except we asked him, what's the example? Where can we find the solution in it? He said, well, Wisconsin's been doing it for 3 years. So we actually went in, got the Wisconsin law. Representative Hamilton will introduce that bill in February. That's a real solution fix. Now, it's a couple $100,000 in mileage and traveling around the state, but if you start with $100,000 here or there, you know, so as the saying goes, pretty soon it'll add up to real money. And whether it's $1.2 billion or not, I don't think it'll quite get to that high. But those are some specific examples.
Dairy farmers.
Yeah. And another case was a gentleman who's a financial planner, and he's moved here from California, had some family that were living in Minnesota, and he had customers in Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, so he wanted to live in Minnesota. He went through the permitting process. He sent his permit into Wisconsin request. It was $50. Took him 2 weeks. He got it back. Same with South Dakota and North Dakota. In Minnesota, he was on 3 months when he was at the meeting with us, and he still hadn't had his permit. He'd spent $1,200. He said, I don't understand why. He said, Wisconsin's no more sophisticated or less sophisticated than we are in Minnesota. He did say that about the Dakotas, but that, you know. I have family there, so I can attest to that.
Hey, that's where you got your education.
Yeah, I can attest to it. But that's the kind of examples, the hard examples. He said, explain to me why that is. And I said, you know, I can't. I said, you know, explain to us the problems he went through, the paperwork. So we sat down. We had somebody sit down with him and go over the paperwork and see where we could duplicate. Now, we're not going to lower our standards to Wisconsin level or Dakota level, but if we're going to be competitive, we've got to have at least the same kind of paperwork. If theirs is a 2-pager and ours is 16 pages and it comes hardbound, there's something that we're doing that's different that we have to update.
Can I just, for
Sure.
one quick second, and I'm going to maybe interject some controversy here, and I don't know the particular details of it, Kurt, but they paid $50 in Wisconsin, the fee, and they paid $1,200 fee in Minnesota. I would venture to guess, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to go back and check on this when we get back, and I will send word back with one of the legislators. That's no new taxes at work. That's what happened. That's how we balanced the budget from when Kurt got there and when I got there, is we raised a bunch of fees. And I'm going to go back and find out, and I'll report back. If I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. But that's what happened to balance the budget when we had the last huge deficit, is a bunch of fees went up. Fees on services, fees on dairy farmers, fees on financial workers and stuff. So I'm going to go back and check. I don't know if you know either or not if that's the case, but I'm going to go back and check and see if that fee was raised in order to balance the state budget a few years ago.
And I don't know about the fee for the
Because
permit.
that's a huge difference, $50
Right.
to
That's what I said.
So we should go back and check. And
Right.
so and we'll report back to you. I'll give the answer to Kurt, and then I'll give it to somebody else to make sure he tells you the truth.
Give it to me. You can trust a lobbyist.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, trust a lobbyist.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of the action last week.
Sure.
By a district judge who placed a restraining order on a very small portion of the unallotment. I think it was about $5.3 million for a nutritional program that was out there. So obviously $5.3 million of the $2.7 billion, very small number. But although the administration has said they're going to appeal the decision, and so we'll wait to see what comes out of that. But isn't this a little bit of be careful what you ask for? I mean, if you kind of expanded this, if the whole thing becomes unraveled, that puts an incredible pressure on the legislature and the governor moving forward. So what are your thoughts on that, Representative Sertich?
Sure. I don't see it that way, and here's why. There are some things that transcend balancing a state budget. And I read, I think, an excellent article in the Star Tribune that there are some individuals that don't want to talk about this lawsuit because they're afraid of retribution. If they speak up and say that this was unconstitutional, which is what the judge said, that there'd be some sort of retribution, and then they'd be cut by either the governor in unallotment or it'd be taken out by the legislature. We have an amazing form of government, and once you get past Democrats and Republicans, what was put in place from our forefathers, not just in Minnesota, but in our country, is this check and balance system. This check and balance system that says that the legislature, the people that are elected from every corner of this state, are the ones that draw up the state budget. And the governor has line item veto authority. He can sign or veto bills. And in rare instances when we don't see it coming, he can correct the state budget. And then if we screw it up, or if the governor screws it up, not just in a budget or in any law, the courts are there to be the check and balance on us as well. And that's where our system worked this time. And it's that basic and simple, that we need that check and balance. And I don't care if it's a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, no one person should violate the state constitution. And if it throws our budget out of balance, so be it. It's our job to solve the budget. And I'm going to keep repeating, whether it's $1.2 billion this year or $2.7 billion if this court case moves on, that doesn't matter because our budget's going to be in deficit over 20% next go around. And that's something a lot of legislators and a lot of the gubernatorial candidates don't want to talk about because nobody has come up with a solution to solve that budget. Even this last time, when Senator Bonoff talked about the delayed payments to schools, that was a significant chunk. That was $1.8 billion of a $2+ billion solution. That's not solving the problem. That's kicking the can down the road to past the next election and putting it in the laps of the next legislature, who might do it again and again. And that's the instability I think Kurt was talking about too. As a business community and families, you want assurances that there's stability above and beyond anything. Well, there isn't any stability if you just keep kicking the can down the road, and legislative forums you have before you and governors come before you every year and say, well, we got a huge deficit again, don't know where it came from. Well, it came from the people before them. So I see this court case differently. It's not a be careful what you wish for. It's let's solve the problem. And let's solve the problem in a fair way that actually follows the letter of the law and the state constitution.
Representative Zellers.
Thank you, and wow, that was a lot. You got a lot in a little bit of time there.
You'll learn. You're new to this.
I was going to say that the only thing left was the Viking Stadium.